But again, like we started with Condé Nast and the latest facts that are out there and insights, Skift is very much the pulse of what's happening in travel and tourism. In all the different sectors, they run all sorts of different research. They really are on top of this, and in the travel industry as well, which I recently came across Skift in South America, where they're doing a lot of interesting work as well. So Patrick's going to lead us off, and then we're going to bring up a panel of storytellers and communicators that come from each element of the three different elements: food, travel, and culture. And then we'll go into a full wrap on the whole day. Patrick, over to you.
Well, thanks, Al. So my name is Patrick Whyte, and I'm here to talk to you about the importance of storytelling and food tourism. So food tells a story of a destination's history, culture, and people, better than almost anything else. But for a long time it was treated in an unsophisticated way. Glossy images of couples dining at an expensive, dining out at expensive restaurants was a stock idea. There was no context to what was going on in the plate. Slowly, though, tourist boards and destination marketing organisations have woken up to the fact that it is more important than ever to communicate with authenticity. So hopefully by the end of my short presentation, you'll have an idea of the state of the market in 2016 and some good examples of persuasive, authentic storytelling. So I think this quote sums up where we are in the evolution of tourism, and it comes from chef Anthony Bourdain. So he says, if you do a poll of what motivates people to travel to a particular place, food is not the number one reason. I'm sure that's a significant change. I think people are less interested in scouting online to get the Eiffel Tower, look around and condemn it. I think they're looking to have a more, for a lack of a better word, real experience. And we've heard about that this morning as well. Before I show you some examples of good visual storytelling, I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about Skift, as I'm not sure all of you are familiar with it. So Skift is the largest platform in travel, providing media, insights and marketing, all sectors of the world's largest industry. We also decide and define trends for marketers, strategists and technologists in the global travel industry. So this is back when we started in 2014 with 5 people. And this is us now. This was taken this year. And it was taken at an annual outing, which this year is in Cuba. Unfortunately, I was at a wedding that weekend, so couldn't go. I'm not bitter about that at all. And these are all the products we have. So we've got the website, skift.com, which is what we like to call the homepage of the travel industry. I started working with a company this summer to try and bring more of a European focus to the news. We've also got our trend reports, which is the third one across, which I'm sure some of you will be familiar with. We've got a growing team of researchers providing deep dives into various sectors. Much of what you'll hear today comes from one of those pieces, and they can be purchased either individually as part of a subscription. And then the one on the far right side, the Skift Global Forum. It's our annual event where we get speakers from across the industry. And the main one's just being held in New York in September. But we're bringing the concept to Europe next year, so if anybody's interested in hearing about it more, come and talk to me afterwards. So if you choose to remember anything from my talk today, apart from how amazing Skift is obviously, it's these 3 points. And I'd just like to, obviously, you're all from different backgrounds, have different jobs. But if you're selling food tourism, consider the following 2 things. Unfortunately, Henry's mentioned these things, Jean-Michel as well. Segmentation is number 1. Exploration is number 2, and thirdly, and possibly most important for some people, don't forget the booze and other stuff. So, segmentation. Eating out is big business, and you don't really need to tell you that. This graph shows US annual restaurant spend per capita in the direction it's heading. Obviously very positive. But destinations are missing out on all the stays, more repeat visitation, and higher average visitor spending if they're not promoting their food tourism products in line with current trends. The biggest shift in the evolution of food tourism strategy today is segmentation. What appeals to one foodie won't necessarily appeal to another foodie. It's therefore paramount to separate the different verticals within culinary travel experiences. A sample of these might include fine dining, casual dining, and then say food festivals, that's another segment entirely. Travel Library segments its eat and drink section into an incredible 14 categories, ranging from foraging experiences to distillery tours and ranch days. So in this first video, I'm going to show you something from Catalonia's tourist board, and they've clearly done their research when it comes to segmentation. The region is home to one of the world's best restaurants, and I'm going to have a go at pronouncing it, probably butchering it entirely, but El Celler de Colroca in Girona. If I've got that wrong, you can talk to the athletes and tell me how bad it is, but anyway. So they managed to persuade the Rocker brothers to talk about their relationship with the island and its influence on their crafts. So here's the video.
¿De qué te gusta caminar? Seguramente te gusta el seu paisatge.
M'alegra portar als Pirineus que de l'antany siguessin inspirador.
Però també té gust sofregit, picades, a mar i muntanyes, salats i dolços.
Com deia Pla, la cuina és el paisatge portat a la cassola. Sempre ens ha servit la idea de menjar-se el paisatge. Aquest espai tan nostre, que ha donat caràcter i essència al nostre poble.
No seríem qui som sense els fills de la terra.
Per un cuiner la terra és la identitat, és l'autenticitat, és la possibilitat de poder mostrar, a través de la cuina, que és un llenguatge, mostrar històries.
Per avançar, primer s'ha d'adquirir el coneixement del passat. Nosaltres ho hem pres tot de la mare.
Catalunya ha donat molta diversitat a través dels seus llibres i del seu llegat, també d'aquestes tradicions properes. Tot això configura la cuina del Cilla i Can Ruca. Tenim la sort, com a cuiners que cuinem en aquest territori, que tenim productes extraordinaris. No? I, per tant, el producte pot ser, i de fet és, un punt de partida importantíssim, que dona peu a plats extraordinaris.
Que com seria la nostra cuina si no haguéssim nascut a Catalunya? Sempre hem estat envoltats de gent que ens ve a veure amb il·lusió. Es deixen portar, que nosaltres podem provocar i jugar. I amanir una ballada en la qual hi ha gent que comenta que per a ells això és un espectacle. La gent ens regala el seu temps i ve amb les mans obertes. No podem decebre'ls. A què té gust Catalunya? Tasta-les.
So that video not only looks great, but the way the brothers speak about food is incredibly poetic, and when combined with the way it's shot, it makes the whole thing really stand out. It creates a sense of place, so you can almost taste Catalonia from just looking at that video. It's incredible. So on to my next tip, I guess, is exploration. And now not everywhere is Catalonia, but that doesn't really matter. In the past, I think destinations were maybe too fixated on just fine dining. And one of the biggest trends we're seeing is the rise of casual dining and comfort food. Food tourists today are compelled to explore deep into local neighbourhoods, beyond the typical tourist scenes. They'll travel further away from hotels for a memorable meal, and they're more willing to ask probing questions about the process behind the meal's production. The more unique the culinary experience is, the more unique the traveller and their destination experience is. So earlier this year, Skift launched a survey to better understand the American culinary palate, particularly when travelling. Obviously this is an American survey, but I feel it kind of translates to the rest of the world as well, hopefully. So over 2,000 people responded to the survey asking, you're going on vacation, which food and tourist experiences most reflect your identity in travelling? So remember the number of segments I mentioned earlier? Well, maybe surprisingly, I guess, gastropubs, burgers and beer earned almost a full third of the votes. Fine dining only ranked fourth. Now, a great example of this idea of exploration and storytelling comes from the US. Ben Ali and his wife Virginia opened Ben's Chili Bowl at Washington's famous U Street in 1958. And Destination DC produced a stark black and white video of Virginia sitting at one of their tables, explaining how the neighborhood was evolved since Martin Luther King's assassination. You'll probably never see anything like this in a tourist video. So play the video to see what you think.
You speak nice. very prominent and important street to the African American community. It was segregated. You drive up to a business and you see it's busy, and that's where the food's good, especially a restaurant, that's where the food's good. So we opened on August 22nd, 1958. We were readily accepted by the community. After the riots of 1968 and 19 was assassinated, the change became drastic. The neighborhood was devastated by what happened during that time. Well, the new you is really a new you. A month's away for a two-bedroom apartment about $4,200. And that's where the drug addict used to be. It's an amazing community. It really is amazing.
So I'm not sure if you caught all that, but the frankness of the delivery and the way it's shot really conveys things how much have changed, not just on U Street, but in the US as a whole. And I think this video makes you want to visit Ben's Chili Bowl to experience like 6 decades of change in America. I've actually been here. It's a really incredible place, and if you haven't been there, in DC, go and check it out. It's pretty amazing. So, on to slides. On to my next slide, and this is my third point. Don't forget the booze. And other things as well. So this might sound counterintuitive, but one thing that a lot of destinations get wrong is maybe focusing too much on eating out. And this is a quote from Eric Whyte, who is the Executive Director of the World Food and Travel Association. So he says that's just 5% of the things that are involved in food tourism. We're interested in food tours, food festivals, farmers markets, factory tours, going to the grocery store to purchase food and beverage souvenirs to take home, and lots of other activities. So I'm going to show you a video now, which is a great example of maybe an untypical food tourism promotion video. So Canada's maritime provinces make up one of the most under-leveraged economy destinations in North America. And Newfoundland and Labrador tourism let Laura McCarthy, a local food enthusiast, represent the voice of the entire region in this video coming up. She runs a company called Cod Sands, which offers a very distinctive type of culinary adventure, as you'll see. So we'll play the video.
Most of my friends say to me, if I'm ever going to be stuck in the woods, I want to be stuck in the woods with you. It's easy to make a beautiful plate of food. Sometimes you don't have to bring anything with you. You can pick the mussels and you can pick the oyster plant, and the colors are beautiful. The moment that you pick something, that's when it's at its best. And if you make something with it right then, you'll never get that color again. You just can't. I think that the passion for food, for me, comes from being told how hard it was to put it on the table. We, as a people, learn to hunt and pick and learn how to preserve. And again, a lot of it was probably out of necessity, but it was there, it was available, and you just had to put the hard work in to get it. And I want to pass that on to my kids. I want to know that from hard work comes something beautiful. But also beautiful, you're right. You know, the line that my mom still uses, nothing tastes as good as a cup of tea in the woods. And it's true. It tastes better because of where you are and the people you're with. And that's a beautiful thing.
She actually makes foraging look fun, and the video not only shows off the locally sourced food, but also has a dual purpose of showing off the scenery as well. Now I'd also say don't just think about food. In many countries, drinking is just an important part of the culture. Oh, sorry. Think of Dublin itself with Guinness, as you heard from earlier, and Lynchburg, Tennessee with Jack Daniels. However, I would say that the trend now is for smaller, more independent producers with more localized stories. And up there are some good examples worth checking out afterwards. We've got the Denver Beer Trail, we've got the Austrian Schnapps Trail, the Columbus Coffee Trail, and the Santa Fe Margarita Trail. all different examples of good kind of food tourism. And this is the last video I want to show you. So it's about wine tourism, which has grown exponentially in the past few decades. It's now a massive business in places like that, Chile and New Zealand, who managed to line up film director James Ciaran to talk about some of the country's more underappreciated regions. So we'll just play the video.
This is a very, very good wine season. If you drive over the Rooftop Range, you go to Featherstone and down to Martinbury, you get into the wine country. It's just stunning. It's just one great view after another. There's some really world-class wines. There's a vigor, there's experimentation. People are excited about it. They're passionate about it. They want to talk about it. There's a personal touch. You can meet the winemaker. They're happy to show you where they grow. You get some things that are quite unique. I find that fascinating.
So in many ways that video is almost quite old-fashioned, but I think it does show that it's great to show the approachability of winemakers and other people involved in food tourism, and that's what makes it different. You need to make sure you can show that people are approachable and friendly, and that's going to encourage people about visiting. And that's it, actually. So yeah, just to recap, 3 tips for telling great stories about food. Make sure you get segmentation right, and make sure exploration is up there, and don't forget the bridges and other things. That's it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Patrick. Can you take a seat there? And we've got some very special guests, most of them dressed quite funnily. Did you notice the first mistake with this panel? All male. Well, actually, yeah, he's kind of suspect. Mr. James. Okay, sorry about that, ladies. We've had a good balance most of the day. Okay, so this is what's the story. We saw some, I think, great examples of quite different ways to do it as well. But a lot of them clearly harking back on a lot of the things we heard this morning through each of the sessions. Authenticity, kind of almost a soft sell, a full story. As Howard Hastings says, it's about the people. Notice that this is completely about the people. And food in the background very confidently, etc. Lots of that stuff. So these guys are an interesting bunch. And this is a mixed panel, I would say, despite the balance issue. It is very mixed. So we have Dr. Michael Martin here on the left, who is a historian, a natural storyteller from the south of the country, an academic, and the creator, or should I say, the gathering together of the Titanic trail. So that's one element of it. The bearded gentleman on his right is clearly a rock star. No, Ciaran OGaora, who, believe it or not, Ciaran and I have worked together many times. Ciaran is one of the great communicators, both strategically and from a design point of view. He has worked in all 3 sectors, almost uniquely, in both food, tourism, and culture. And he's worked on diverse projects such as the Abbey, talk about culture, and he's done a lot of work with Boarding through the years, and heavily involved in tourism, and many of the tourism guys here would recognize him as an ex-director of Fort Ireland as well. Then we have Paul Hayes. I don't know how to introduce this guy, but some of those videos there gave me memories straight away, especially the booze tours, the wine tours, and the cycling. Because that's Paul's real passion. In fact, Paul is quite a reputation as the PR guy to go to in the technology business. So he has a slightly different angle on this. he spends his time trying to get tech geeks to realise that at the end of the day they have to be able to tell a story. And again, his passion is on food and tourism, obviously. John Concannon has many aspects to him as well. An ex-senior manager within Fáilte Ireland, an FMCG background, and the man behind the pulling together of that great centenary celebration, the 2016 or 1620, whatever we call it right now. And John has done a phenomenal job, obviously, as you all know, in the last, this year. And it's still not over, right? There's still more events to come. So, these are the storytellers. So can I just throw it to the crowd in terms of anything surprise you on that? Anything that you resonate with particularly from that?
I think what you see, like examples that were drawn out of the text, 100% New Zealand, is that they didn't focus on national brands, or the ATC and the on-the-ground experience that I found.
Yeah.
And most interesting. I think that can be challenging at a national level, but it's actually most resonant, I think, at an individual level.
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting because New Zealand, as again the board deal guys in the audience will know, you're a huge competitor to Ireland in terms of food provenance and dairy and stuff like that, and quite ahead of the game in terms of nation branding. And as Ciaran says, they've moved away from it. Nation is in the background, but it's all about the roots, the towns, it's all the maps, etc. It's an interesting point, and again, something we've seen. Big is bad, small and local is good, and now the advertising guys are getting it. Is that something you found, for instance, Martin?
Well, I think segmentation is very important, and I, for example, in my business would say that, if there are people, segment of people who like to attend academic conferences and sit on and listen to them, but there are also people who want to come and hear a story that's been told in an enjoyable and engaging way. And when I'm training people for our tours, I always say, while history and its delivery always has to be accurate, it never ever has to be boring. You've got to make it engaging, and you've got to relate to people and find connections between where they're from or what they do with where they are. If you can achieve that, if you can make it relevant for the person that's standing in front of you, it really, hits home, and you will get people and grow your business, because they all want to go back and say that they've experienced something different. I often start my show, for example, by saying, was the Titanic the biggest ship in the world? Was everybody clamoring to be on it? Had nothing like it ever been seen before? No. Well, they answer all those questions. So then you have them and they're engaged. And then you move away from what I would call Hollywood narratives. We don't need narratives. Give them reality and that's it. The day of the, purple shamrocks and dancing leprechauns, I think is long since gone. And people are looking for authenticity and for stories being told them, not like history lessons, but like stories.
Yeah, absolutely. John, in terms of your considerable challenge, and if we all remember the first video of the 2016, I don't know if you guys remember it, but it was politically quite difficult to start. Right? It was a very sensitive subject, and yet you were able to wrap it in, ceremony, and it seemed to work. What was the main ingredient there?
Well, in 1916, commemorating the Easter Rising is really a tricky space. And when we started the program about 2 years ago, it was very divisive, very politicized, very negative. People were really concerned, citizens generally, about the experience the country was about to have. But actually, what's happened in the fullness of time is it's been a hugely positive experience for the country, very engaging, and real sense of national pride. And what's driven that, there's a whole lot of reasons, but I suppose what we're coming to the conclusion of is that the focus on the multiplicity of the stories. If you go back to 1966, there was one view of the world which was singular, triumphalist, all male, except this panel, male and very militaristic and religious. So you either bought into that story or you didn't. Whereas this time, 100 years later, we decided, well, what the truth is, there's a whole other story. So for example, the role of women didn't feature anywhere in 1966, massive part in 2016. So the multiplicity of the narratives that underpin the historical experience of Ireland is something so that really brings that point of authenticity, so that we choose what the story is, number one. And then let's tell it in the most colourful and hot way possible. So what we did in that instance was very much once we set the framework, it was an open source to the culture community. And everybody, in fact, so it ended up being about 3,500 events the public organised themselves, and with some of our best artists curate and design the story. So ultimately what it demonstrated was that culture and creativity isn't a peripheral part of Irish life, it's absolutely core to
At parish kind of level.
yeah, and really, the story, I mean, we never designed the Centennial Tree Tourism project or a PR project, but nevertheless, Easter weekend, we have 450 international media from all over the world broadcasting in Ireland. We've had people come from left, right, centre, but the key point, I'd say, is that story, the point of authenticity that came through. To stay true to the story and then tell it in the most ambitious way possible.
Yeah. So that again, it keeps coming back to that the small story. Lots of small stories are better ended than the big broadcast told the party line or anything. Paul, sorry.
Social media, you don't have to have a massive budget to do this. You can Instagram, you can put something on YouTube, and it gives, you can be a small attraction, a small destination, you can still do something that's authentic and different. Using these different platforms, it's much easier than it was in the past.
The social media is huge. Even in the Centennial Program, we have 2.5 million views of our YouTube channel, which is kind of, you can say, a niche enough thing. It's kind of historical and heritage. But you can tell all the stories because you're investing in the clips and so on. So I think it put that everybody has the opportunity to use that much more than the past the big TV ads with the cranberries and stuff like that.
Yeah. That is a constant theme. Again, I know we've said it a lot of times, but it is a huge advantage to be small
but
and to be authentic.
There's a tension there.
Yeah.
In that, we're here celebrating Good Food Ireland. We're recognising that there's certain moments when you need a degree of critical mass. So we can talk about that. It's all about the little stories. It's all about the authentic moments, and in some ways, that's absolutely true. But I think the challenge is how do you create a brand platform that actually brings the attention towards those stories? I think what John was very successful at doing was framing a narrative for this year that was very different than maybe a Sinn Féin Republican narrative, which is very little room for deviation. So I think what's really interesting here is what's the role of branding at a national or regional level. I mean, it's very interesting. We're looking at Catalonia, not Spain.
Yeah.
They're tapping into a nascent nationalism that's bubbling away there. We're looking at black rights for Cool DC, where they're reframing Washington DC violence issues into actually forming authenticity.
Yeah.
So with each of those, it's a question of how do you create a frame that actually means something while at the same time not defining the nature of conversation to take place within it. Yeah. So whether you're remembering the song, or whether you're remembering Green Women in 1916, or the different stories within the Titanic, I think that's the challenge.
Yeah.
That's the real branding difficulty of creating a platform that has meaning, but not so much meaning that it pushes out the authenticity of the brand.
And when it comes to food, just to all of you as well, we talk a lot about tourism and culture, and I think that's important. We also include food as a critical part of it here. But do we see that as well, that tension between the big global message, Irish food is blah, or actually is it much more about the evidencing of the small success stories at the local level?
But since I'm in Croke Park as a Tipperary man, I guess a lot better than I used to now. I think what you do is you have to have multiple frameworks for the stories. John works on a national or international level, and I'll embarrass him now by saying thank you for both the Wild Atlantic Way gathering and saving the country from shinners. In that order, the thing about framing the stories, I think, now I come from the world of tech, know nothing about your work. Grew up in a pub in Tipperary, and I'm kind of coming full circle and I'm going to get back to it, but tech is boring as hell. At least you have interesting products that people want to know about. Nobody wants to know anything about anything my clients do. And all we do is we use food metaphors. So I constantly teach them how to speak about themselves using food, drink, tourism, look at what they do. And what I say is, you're only interesting once. I'm actually lying to you. They're not even interesting once. And for the purposes of this, I'm going to talk to you like you're all tech founders, right? So you're all shuffle around and don't make eye contact with anyone for the next 10 minutes. You're not interesting, but the proof of you in the world as a new trend is interesting. So first, frame the story. It's like the GAA, parish, county, country. Go with your parish first, which is the smallest thing around you, everything within 5 to 10 miles, the sustainable area, and go, these are the criteria for our sector. And then wireframe that story and give it to journalists. But by virtue of the fact that you're the one giving it to them, bringing the other people together, you're framing the debate so that you're the proof of this big trend in the world. And then you can go up to county level. And then you can tap into the national level in terms of where it's going. And I just think that's, you know, you can only be interesting once. You will get lots and lots of profile pieces on you and what you're doing. But the real resonance for people is that story. The story that they can share. Make them feel cool about coming home and sharing that bigger story. And the proof point is you. Don't try and be in the headline of any PR you get over time. You have to start there in terms of establishing yourself, but try to be in the third paragraph as the referee and arbitrator of where the world is going and wireframe that story. That's the truly powerful position. Because then people, you know, it's like, I know nothing about wine, but every couple of years, Chardonnay shit, Albarino, okay. And then it's, I assume it's some large maker within that region is pushing that story, because I can only understand it at that level. And then I want to know, well, what's the finest exemplar of that? It's that person that was telling me that. I was so thrilled to meet so many people from Tipperary making stuff here today, from Dexter Cows to the Country Choice, and also some of the people. But, you know, Tipperary is very hot. And it was phenomenal. I just thought, where are you from? What are you doing? What's the significance of this? How will this play out globally? What's the difference between you and where it's going? If you can't wireframe your story, if you can't have market domain expertise over and above everyone else, but you can slice it and dice it so that only you are the one that's going to rise to the top of that. And then you can, I'll finish on this one, sorry. It's the difference between walking into the pub, sitting down beside someone and going, I'm great. Because that's what most people do by putting out press releases or trying to tell their story about themselves. You come across like a crazy person. You want to walk into the pub and go, did you see the way the world is going? Did you see that happen? And the other thing happened. Jesus, the other thing happened. And let them come to the conclusion by the end of the night that you are great. That's how you do. That's how you do tech PR. You guys have it made. At least you have an interesting product. I don't even want to help you.
I decided the most useless contribution is the best. I'm not there yet. Jesus, where did you go from that?
If I was running for something, that would have been fantastic. I said absolutely nothing, but I said it vitally.
Substance and style.
Mark, I think that it's important to say that, and it ties in with everything you've said lately, and what we're all saying is that in Ireland, in the culture we have, in the communities that we have, under every stone and around every corner, there is a massive heritage and wonderful stories to be extracted, and it's our challenge to do that. Now, I do think Fáilte Ireland's recent proposition, Ireland's Into East, is the closest we've come to identifying that in the last couple of years, because basically what we're saying is the luxury landscape that we have, 10,000 years of history that we have, and our capacity to tell a story development. The Irish version doesn't need the technical gizmos or the pressing buttons to tell a story. We can walk into a field and, you know, speak for an hour about a couple of songs in the corner and bring that to life, interspersing it with our culture, with our beliefs, with the history too. And I think that they're on a very good thing with this Ireland at least, and I think it's going to help us. And equally, as you were saying earlier on, as global level, the Church of Ireland working out around the world, directing people towards Ireland, and they do a lot of research in what the green haze is, what's attracting people to Ireland. And the research has revealed in recent years and has led the formulation of Ireland's entities. And there's something in there for us all. And when you're speaking to people about the story, it's not about yourself, about what this clump of buildings mean and how it interacts with you and so on. Inevitably, food becomes a huge part of that story too. And such a big element of our history anyway, for some negative reasons, but still the great family and so on. But I think just to realise almost, and everybody has a story to tell, there's a story to be extracted from every inch of Ireland, regardless of
if I could put it to you guys, you know, we weren't really directly that close to the food industry per se, in a purist sense. I mean, we heard a lot of things this morning that, you know, the world is changing, people are interested in authenticity, small is good, big is bad, we like the storytelling, we like to prove it, photograph ourselves and tell other people. It sounds like it's the golden age for producers. And anybody that's a producer is now actually a marketeer at the same time. Is that really true, or is that unrealistic? Do certain people have to say, well, you know, forget this storytelling thing, it's not for me, like I just produce this stuff? Or is it more than that?
If you don't tell the story, you lose the control. And that's what it's all about. If you've got the control of the product and the story, you can then charge more money for it, which is what you can make more money for it. If you can control everything, whereas before you maybe had to give away stuff for big people, supermarkets or whatever.
Or you told no story.
Exactly.
You just said, I feed you, or I produce this ham, and it's good. We're hearing a lot about, tell us who produced the ham, what's the background, all that stuff. Is it as clear? Because it seems to me it's clear as day. Everybody is a storyteller now.
The stories are always been there. It's a question of what's the reach that they get. And I think the other element is that in the past, all the examples, they're there to a share, they're all intermediate, they're all edges, they're all very much photographed, they're all highly visual.
Yes.
So the actual individual producers there aren't media savvy, they're media team coming in around those. And in some ways that's the higher end of the storytelling element. But the reality is that people always tell stories, the difference now is that the word is around and the way they get out there.
We're all broadcasters.
A lot more. And then the other element is probably a lot more people in the industry who are out looking for the next thing, which then amplifies and speaks to the point around the trends and the cycles that come around are being fed. But you can't escape a microphone. Every producer has a microphone, even if it's a virtual one. It's a question whether they choose to speak into it. And then through social media with people who are consuming food, that story is being told in many different ways as well.
Yeah.
But I think it's just the ability to get it out there first. So
certainly some people in life are saying that, you know, I'm exposed. Like I never thought about this before. I just did good stuff. Like why do I have to do packaging that tells the narrative of my family, etc.? But it seems like, as you say, someone will
because the story isn't what's. Again, I'd like to insult the audience, if I may. What you do right now is the least interesting thing about you. Where you've come from and where you're going, or more importantly, how your product in my belly or under my head or whatever way I experience it. That's the story. I want to know the provenance and where it's going. I actually want to know very little about what it is right now. I think that used to be the old story in terms of experiential, like going to the spa or doing whatever. It's more, how does my life change? How it's the iPhone stuff. Me plus this phone equals a better life.
Yeah.
For me.
What it says about
That's where they want to get to. It's funny, I just got Margaret, I know a couple of years ago, probably the two of you were in cahoots, I think with about 10 minutes to go, became the food producer for the website. And I know John was a big backer of this. That's all anyone ever talked about. The website isn't tech so much at all. 60,000 morons running around, Turkey when it was here. All they talk about is the food and where they went on the lash. It's not a tech conference in any meaningful sense. It's a cultural conference that was in Dublin. We have to go down to Lisbon next week now to see if he can replicate it. And see, I'm sure he will. It'll be very different. But it'll actually be about Lisbon. Not about what was said or who was said, because our industry is just so phenomenally boring. That what was real was for them the food, the drink, the interaction, the experiences where they came to. That's what was real. And you see it with, I started cycling. I know, it's the body that advertises cycling for the world 4 or 5 years ago, midlife crisis, and
4 or 5 days ago.
Yeah. And I'm actually patenting the cushioned core. It's where if you fall off your bike with exposed abs. That shit's dangerous. You've got to, I'm calorie positive cycling. But anyway, we do a load of charity cycles. This is how you do. When you all get into cycling eventually, when you get old enough, you do it through charity cycles with its pence, because your virility's been taken away by Nana, and you saw your undercarriage off on pence. It's kind of a post-Catholic thing. But anyway, there's another conference on that. And then what happens is you go through your charity thing, and then you realize you can't raise any more money. So you need to go off and do decadent cycles. So I did this. I brought all my clients to California. We did the west of Ireland. I've seen Ronnie from Renville down there, the lads from Newport and Greenway. Just phenomenal that we could actually do that. Actually, we tried to do Michelin star, every 3-star Michelin in Northern California. I ended up in hospital on the first night with a suspected heart attack, so that was a bad idea. There are things that don't actually match up to, but I had a point at the start of my rant here about cycling. Also, cycling is the future. Cycling's going to get everyone from 40 to 60, and then it'll be golf. Just in case you're wondering where all the golfers went. And you've got to start making, especially the accommodation for people. start making your cycle routes out and your storage for bikes. Because the spend is higher than golf and the whole thing. Especially the guys that come with the bikes that are more expensive than their cars. That's pure, the psychology is very weird. Anyway, sorry, what was the original question? I had a really interesting point at one stage. Whyte summit. Yeah, sorry, we're right back to where it was. But
he works off small triggers, you know.
Yeah. But you know, that was what was real for people. That food and drink and experience and where they came to. And also, every major techie that has an exit, the first thing they do, and you can see it from filmmaker there with his vineyard, is buy a vineyard or buy a restaurant. Because that for them is real. It's not bits and bytes anymore. Everyone feels like a fraud in this world. What you do is real. Hospitality, food, it's what we actually all want to get back to. It's the moments we remember. It's everything we actually want. I don't have a point, I just deploy.
Just on the poll, since we're very interactive and modern, it's interesting that question actually is, you know, you could look at that question in Ciaran's way, you know, does it matter how much we tell the story as a food nation? Probably what you could say what's more important is how do you all tell the story? Is what the food nation said.
I think it's important because
Context.
still depending on the context.
Yeah.
And I think that there's for all the agencies, whether it's in tourism, whether it's in culture, whether it's in food, there is a real challenge over the way in which you facilitate the creation of that. To what extent is it a big campaign, to what extent is it facilitation on the ground. And I think it's still trying to find its way and trying to cross the optimum mix.
Yeah.
And it's not a straightforward thing.
That's a pretty damning. That's not so good, guys. That's quite surprising. So 29 people, and more than half said it's fine. Sorry, more than half. More than three more than 3/4, more than 84%.
Yeah, but the thing is if you look at the question, how well do we tell our story? It's not asking how well does Port Beachhut or how well does folks Ireland. It's just like a collective story. And I think the challenge there is a food nation. If this is terroir or terroir, what was interesting with some of the research a few years back is that the consumers were really into the terroir that exists. There's more than Guinness in Ireland. There's loads of great states other than Guinness. There's varieties in all food types, and it's about that journey of exploration through them rather than this is the one that's the best. And that exploration, that journey, in a way, is what creates the tour. And I think to what extent, in our own minds, and to what extent the state agencies really believe that we can celebrate that diversity, or is it about identifying those few things on scale that define how our nation is using food?
It's interesting as well that from again what we've heard today, if at a local level, the tourism guide, the food guide, and the culture guide, if they cooperate a lot more, and not worry too much about whether Borbia has a joint committee with Fudge Ireland and Tourism Ireland, because for sure they do for years. But the real action, it seems to me, is at the local level. And if the local level really works, then with new economics and marketing, that's the story that counts actually.
That was at the heart of John's strategy, in a way, building on the gathering components.
Of the gathering works at that level, John.
Well, the interesting thing is that I was just looking at the survey there, where's that? Is do we tell our story? How well do we tell our story as a food nation? I actually think there's more how well we tell our story full stop. Because just as you mentioned there, it is about collaboration between all those sectors, culture, food, tourism, and so on. And nationally, we have a multiplicity of people. I think that's, IDA, Enterprise Ireland, Science Foundation, Ireland Board of Tourism, Ireland, Fudge Ireland, all of our embassies and consulates, all of these organisations. And in my experience, I have to say they're all doing a really, really good job. And they're really full of great people. But the question I pose is, by having everybody operating in a semi-independent way, in a country of 4.5 million people, we have to sell into a world of 7 billion people. There is an argument, just as you say, globally, people collaborate much more to get a collaborative narrative nationally. There's a big opportunity for Ireland to say, well, are we really doing this as well as we could do just because we used to always have these groups and do we always do that? I think that's a big question that Ireland and a nation branding needs to answer. If you look at the Nordic countries now, if you look at New Zealand and the people are now stepping back and say, first and foremost, a country has to be a great place to live. And people have to enjoy living there, they have to enjoy having a family there, it has to be a great place to to be. And then it can be complicit or investing and so on. So sometimes, you know, with all of the multiplicity of people talk about Ireland, the question I pose is more, are we telling our story, or what is our story? And maybe bring that back to the first principles. But also the point is, you talk about brands and platforms and collaboration. Oftentimes it's easier for us to be very private and very, you know, accentuating our differences. I remember when I started working about 12 or 13 years ago in Ireland as tourism, there was 9 organisations come up in Galway. Galway Tourism, East Galway Tourism, Connemara Tourism, Ronnie is here, Connemara, Irish Platform Tourism. And all that, in fairness, they're doing a good job, but scale and critical mass just was not possible to come. We brought that together and eventually became a very strong force in the West of Ireland. But looking at the food sector, it's very, very disparate. But we do need some clusters of brand leading platforms, we call it, that can cut through and make sense. And I do think Good Food Ireland, a very full validation work has happened. That experiential nature of what's happening, since telling a really strong ambassadorial story for the whole sector. You know, Paul talked about the website, that was very great example. And it got great international coverage, and people weren't necessarily saying, no, Good Food Ireland is made, but Ireland is made for food. So I think while you do want to tell your individual story, that's really important. Organisations like Good Food Ireland really have to be supported because they tell a very authentic, real story at a more of a brand level that can come through and make sense internationally.
In terms of just going back to the Scandinavian example there, the emergence, it came up a few times, the emergence of Nordic cuisine and that whole thing, which came from nowhere, it seems. It's interesting, when you look back, there was very little umbrella effort. You know, Scandinavia didn't suddenly come together and decide that they were going to do this big branding exercise. It actually happened from below. And if we looked at that, and some of the initiatives that we've seen talked about today, I mean, do you think, it seems to me that there's a phenomenal future for this. If we do this right, and we look at what's happening, we look at current marketing economics, the story that could go out about Ireland food could be phenomenal.
But Paul's got it right when he said the stories we hear, the authenticity. I'm looking at food in Galway and the amount of brilliant producers, restaurants, hotels, and in Connemara and Edinburgh is absolutely fantastic. So we do have we end up with raw material. There is a question about bringing it together and giving it an audience, otherwise we're just talking to ourselves. And also segmentation. I remember it's really important, Patrick, talking about segmentation, and segmentation is so important, but it's really important to get it right too. I remember way back a few years ago in Whyte, Ireland, the Discover Ireland program, and there was this thing called the Golden Years, which was set up way back, and it was for people older. So basically, and we did a lot of research with people about it, and would we continue the Golden Years, and anyways, so we go for 20 years, and we set up this group who were aged between 68 and 75, so Golden Years, hardcore, and talked to them about the way they were spoken, it's absolutely fantastic, it's pretty cool, we really think that's great. So, and who's it for? Oh, it's for the old people. So this is the old people saying it's for the old people. So the old people, I just really caution people about geodemographic segmentation. It's very easy to do. These people are this age, this is where they live. It needs-based, i.e. what do people want to do? Attitude. I mean, we the global cultural identified with this cultural curious. We any age, just what you're into is much more important to segmentation than who your label is.
And now you can find out so much. Sorry,
people focus on the millennials, and that's the generation, but it's not the age group, it's the attitude. You know, there's actually the present of people who are 50 and 60, not just people who are 25. It's you can't fixate on their age.
Ciaran, and then just maybe address this question at the very end of the program.
Just one of the things that struck me in Patrick's presentation there, just about the increase in terms of gastro codes and so on. Because there's two things that struck me with the research that myself and I took in a few years back about Ireland. One is that people don't have international visitors or consumers didn't have a sense of what Irish cuisine is beyond the pub. And then the second thing is that pub element in terms of the network of Irish pubs around the world means it's very hard for us to get beyond what might be perceived to be, in some people's minds, less of a food culture. So while you say don't forget about the drink, there's two things. One, I'd be really interested to understand how do we actually communicate a sense of how really Ireland is. But it's quite different than how it might have been in our parents' times when people think of Irish cuisine. And then what way do we maybe, rather than push the pub away internationally, how do we pull it closer if it's on trend. So there is some interesting things there for us to try and reflect on, because oftentimes we try to run away from our stereotypes, and you never
Rather than harness. Yeah, very good.
I think just to bring in the tech community, my people, the people on the spectrum who don't make eye contact, they're coming to save you with the self-driving car, which will save the Irish rural pub. It will be nothing. I think we should, as a nation, we're small enough, 200 kilometres. It'll be nothing but farmers giving fingers to cops. It'll be phenomenal. And that message will go around the world. Although there'll be then people arrested because they were too drunk to turn on the self-driving car. Just as I was bladdered. I couldn't drive myself home. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. That was sponsored by Elon Musk. Last question. Any comments on that one? It's kind of, in the end of the day, how do we tell the story? Is that simply we all tell the story and as you get out there, or is there a way we can do it better? Is there a way that we can cooperate maybe at the operational local level or at the local level, as distinct from kind of theoretical, I would say, sometimes cooperation at a very high level?
Well, I think the importance of the local synergies can't be overemphasised. I, for example, am asked on a regular basis, where can we eat?
From the trail.
And what we say to people, it depends on what your likes are. You can get absolutely anything. You can get anything here. If you love steaks, you can go down here. That particular restaurant goes to the same farmer and butcher for his meat. This little restaurant over here, the lady who owns the restaurant, when she takes one day out, she closes the restaurant. So she oversees every single food and every single meal. So people are fascinated by those additional stuff. And I think Good Food Ireland, with its establishment, bringing together, the suppliers and the sustainability, has made a very, very good start. I mean, 10 years there now, and I think they're a great outlet. And we need more synergy at local level. I think there's a job to be done by Tourism Ireland outside. They're directing people to Ireland. You can't break down a message about Ireland into a million different parts. It's got to be something general and all-encompassing about our food, our people, and our stories, basically. And then it behoves all of us at local level to respect those stories and to work together to direct people around. Because often in the tourism sector, those who are involved in guided tours don't see themselves finished with a restaurant at all, or don't see themselves finished with a hotel, it's a different area of business. But synergies are crucial because those of us who deal with them at the front line, we're answering questions like that, and we're directing around. I can see when you begin to speak about the food, either the way in which it's served or how it's served, or we're talking about the English market in Cork City, and Kate's restaurant there, and people are fascinated. Let's go and see. So it's about us talking more and more synergy between us.
At that level. John, last comment?
The notion of collaboration is so important. And just to use the example Paul took of the tech sector, before the website became a massive success that it is, it started out in a small
like this,
well, much smaller than this gathering. It was called Founders, and the team involved in it brought some of the top founders, Ciaran from YouTube, and Nicholas Setzer from Skype, and Jack Dorsey from Twitter, and a good bunch of other people from Dublin. And they really didn't have an offer to go on, but in conversation with them when we were helping them before trial, we figured out that the food is something that really hit them. And John McKay this year put together this phenomenal experience in Ivy House, which was all based on authentic artisanal food, like the burnt smokehouse. And every course John's done was explaining where the food came from. This came from such and such a farm, and what happened that night, when we monitored in Concannon, was the start of Social Research 2010, was the scale of discussion that was happening online about John's
Jack
was
tweeting
exponentially more than the whole rest of the thing. And exactly, so and people talked about that the following year, and this is an experience they had, the food experience that night, and then that led ultimately to Margaret coming on board on the balance there. So I think that's an example of collaboration cross-sectorally.
Really,
the more sometimes with all these agencies and everybody, you become more institutionally non-collaborative because you're defending your patch and so on. I think the more boundaries and the people in industry and innovators like we're today will drive that change. We just really haven't heard it strong enough.
I mean, it'd be interesting if instead of just local producers working with the local enterprise office, they also work with the local arts office to breathe life into the story. Because you can't always afford production values we saw here today. So there isn't a silver bullet, but if there is, it's not one, it's multiple, it's that whole synergy thing.
And real authenticity coming through.
We've got another one. Yeah, as long as there's no comeback, and it's the last.
I know,
I'd like to put a pin on this grenade and just leave it out there. And I say this from a dedicated position of ignorance of your whole industry. So I think we have a scale problem in the sense that we were born on a small rock, the best rock on the planet as far as I'm concerned, because of global warming, we're the only ones to survive. But it's a tiny, tiny rock, and we suffer from small rockitis. We are a vaguely interesting ancient city surrounded by an amazing theme park. That's all we are. We are the length of the commute in Silicon Valley from San Francisco to San Jose. Silicon Valley, by the way, is a shithole. It's like Clondalkin, two-story nothing. It's where you go if, even though that's where I have to live, it's awful. I actually do think that we should turn around the way that we market, in terms of how we market this place. It is an amazing city for a 2 or 3 day stay, and then you should spend 7 days exploring the rest of it. But it's actually a tiny, tiny region, and we should make that tininess a point. It's doable. I'm not sure I was pulling the pin on your head there, just so I should say that.
Wonderful. Thanks, Paul. You will do it. Okay, thank you very much for the story. Okay, we're now into the final session, and I'm going to pick up some of the questions. I'm going to ask the international speakers to come back up. All the speakers are welcome, of course, and most of them are still here. Yeah, here we go. Mic, guys.